Hello, hello. Thanks so much for joining us today. We have a great NITRO Studio workshop planned for you. I'm joined today, of course, by our fabulous Director of Operations, James Restivo, and he's also our resident NITRO Guru. So he's got some great things to share with us. And we're going to be covering an overview and guidelines of syntax used in NITRO. Really helpful topic. I think it'll be interesting in helping us all use NITRO a little bit more seamlessly and easily. And so there's a lot for us to cover. But before we get into that, just a little reminder, we're going to keep it high level. I know James has some great things to dive into, but if you would like to get more specific, if you have like a really specific use case that you'd like some help with, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're here for you. Happy to help always. And also, this is meant to be interactive. We like to hear from you. We love to get your questions. We put on these workshops to support you, our customers. So if you do have questions as we're going through, don't be shy. We want to hear from you. Use that question box. And lastly, this will be recorded. So we'll be uploading this as always to our YouTube channel as well as to our website. So you can check the recording there if you do need to go back and reference anything again. But without any further ado, I'd like to go ahead and hand things off to James. James, what do you have for us today?
Thanks, Krista. Yeah, that's a great introduction. Happy to have you guys here with me today on this warm, finally sunny afternoon. I'm in Rhode Island. Hopefully it's warm and sunny where you all are located. It's nice to get that little breath of fresh air and warmth, and it feels nice. It feels really nice, to be honest. Yeah, like Krista said, feel free to pop into that questions box anytime you have something you want to ask. I'm just going to go get my monitor shared here. And what I wanted to show you is this the grid I was working on, kind of this grid of tables, and I'm, put this as a handout, but we can look at different ways to present this and maybe put it up on our .help site. But you'll notice in the panel, the GoToWebinar panel, around where that questions box is, there's also a handout section. You'll see 1 of 5, and you can go ahead and download this and use it and refer to it. Now, this is a document I was putting together over the last few days to really get my head around the syntax used in NITRO, because I know sometimes I struggle with it. I know our customers do as well, because some of it is limitations with programming in SharePoint, that we have to do things a certain way in certain areas, and that's not always obvious to the end user or someone who's not using NITRO all the time. We do have some articles out there. We have 3 great articles. If you look for syntax in NITRO workflow, syntax and custom actions, syntax and NITRO forms, you'll get a lot of the same information I'm presenting now. I'm just presenting it in a slightly different way that hopefully will give you maybe different context, maybe a different view into how the syntax is used and when to use it. And I picked some of the common things that people tend to write in their support tickets about, or tend to have misconfigured when they write in and have issues. But if there's something you don't see here, absolutely put in the questions box. I can augment this. We can make this a living document. I can put it out on our .help site as an article. Those articles can always be updated as we go. So if we find new things that you are struggling with, or just don't quite have a handle on how and when to use this syntax, then we can address that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it as like a syntax by syntax basis, right? So this is, the way it's laid out in our articles is we have the custom actions and all the different, variations that you have in the different things in the custom actions and the condition builder, column mappings, etc. And then, we have the same thing for workflows. We have the same thing for forms, which really ties back into form event actions, and this align HTML control as well, which is not actually part of form event actions, but is in our NITRO forms. So this is kind of a different way to look at it. And I'm going to go through kind of on a syntax by syntax basis. And you'll see it kind of helps to immediately eliminate some things in hopefully your mind to understand when not to use the percent signs. That comes up a lot. Like we see that a lot of questions like, I don't know when to use it, when it comes into play. And this hopefully will help clarify things. And one of the things I really, I think is important to clarify here and use of Nitro is that there's a condition builder, and I'll show this and get into this, probably repeat this a number of times throughout this workshop, but there's a condition builder, which is what you can use to fire off the workflow. You can use it for the gateways in actions and workflows. But then there's also the query list builder, the query builder. Now, understandably, it can be kind of confusing because they look exactly the same, and with the and or and the different columns they can add in there. But really, that's one of the main functional differences between when you're going to see these percent signs being used and not being used, is in the context of that query list builder. You can see here right away in our condition builders across the board, we don't use it. You can use your literal values, you can use your column placeholders like you have down here for the internal display names and in square brackets. You can see it's slightly different across the different tools as well. So hopefully this helps illustrate that as well. But you'll see that the percent sign specifically, you're not using that in your condition builder. You're not using that in column mappings. You can use it in mail templates if you're referring to like a query list action or a variable that you want to use as a placeholder versus a column placeholder. And then the big area where it's used most often is going to be in our query list action, right? So the query list action, like I said, that's going to be where you have a different kind of, programmatically the context is different. So behind the scenes, what you're not seeing is that query builder is going to be a different context than the condition builder. And therefore we can't directly use a column placeholder. We have to encapsulate it in these percent signs to help build it out. And that's just kind of the way it was designed with a camel query. Essentially, we're basically giving you a way to build a camel query to go get information from another list, whereas the condition builder is not using that camel query scenario. So it's a slightly different way of doing it. Hopefully that helps explain a little bit those differences, but I just want to show you also in action where these things would come into play. So like in custom actions, you're going to, you have your condition builder here. And again, this condition builder up here, you're not going to need the the percent signs for this kind of condition builder. If you're using a gateway, same thing. It needs another. Hold on. Always needs another node. So we got another node out there. Okay, there we go. Same thing. This is a condition builder, so those percent signs are not going to be needed. This is going to take literal values or placeholders. One thing I do want to make clear is you can't do both. So if you wanted to say something, I don't know what's a good. Fortunately, I didn't come up with a good use case for some of this stuff. But let's say you want to say created. That's not a really good one. Let's say title. Let's just use title. And it's all the way down here. All right, so use title. So that could be a string and you want it to match something, but you want it to always say it has ABC at the beginning, but then matches up with a like the category, which would be square bracket category. So this is not supported. I just wanted to make sure this is known. This is not supported. You can use the ABC as a literal value and probably use like contains, and then you could use the category as a placeholder value, but not at the same time. So I just want to make that clear in the condition builder. Those cannot be used at the same time, but you can use either. You can use the placeholder like this, or you can use the let me just double check. Condition builder for custom actions. Yeah, you can use internal for column names. Look at that. So we can go ahead and use the internal name. You don't have to worry about that. I think in our system is category 1 for some reason. But so that gives you some insight there. Now that's going to be in opposition to the query lists. Or if we come into the query list, you've got the query builder, which I gotta select my list for a second. And select the tickets list. All right, there we go. Now you can see obviously this looks very similar to our condition builder. It's using kind of the same control, the UI control essentially in the background. But because of the way we build the query, it does require us to use those percent signs if we're building out something as a placeholder, right? So you want to do this, assign staff. So that's going to help build that camel query. So camel query is a kind of a SQL query language, CAML. I don't ask me what it stands for. I could look it up. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm sure some of you might know on this call, but CAML type of query is a query language that we use. Sometimes if you use this query over here, you can see we're saying it's specifying as a CAML query. But in the query builder, we're basically building that for you, so you don't have to know the actual language. It makes it a little easier for our users to interact with the tool, so it's more user friendly this way. But that is one of the drawbacks of it, is that you do need to use these percent signs in that context of the query builder. That's the main difference. That's one of the main differences in when you're going to use that percent sign versus not use it. Again, like I said, in the mail templates you could use it, and in the line control. But let me show you those two as well. I'll go back over here and see where's the context of it. So in the query list action, we're going to use it in the mail template. Actually, we're going to use it. So what we do is we put a send mail action on here. And I'm just going to select, whatever kind of mail template. So our mail templates list is going to be used by our email manager and by custom actions. So this is going to be consistent across those two. But you see, there's the context, or the syntax for your placeholder in the context of the mail body. This is less something you don't necessarily need to remember, because you do have the option to come over here on the right-hand side and select your column that you want to add, and it'll automatically add those brackets around it, right? So if you want to add issue type and we add that to body, it automatically creates that syntax for you. So it makes it a little easier for you. But if you wanted to type something directly, you have that capability as well. But the other thing you want to do is, if you wanted to refer to a query list, have some kind of query list action in our custom action, and from that query list action, because we're going and querying another list, and let's say we pull back one item for that list and it has a particular assignee on it, we could use the syntax of this and put the percents around it. So again, that would be another area you might use that percent sign, is in the context of a mail template where you want a dynamic column it's coming in from another, maybe another list, like through a query list action perhaps. And we also have that in variables, right? So if you want to use a variable value, you could do the same thing. So you could do var1 # value, whatever that value is. So you could, with the way NITRO works, is you could use your query list action and then input that whatever information you get back from that query into a variable, and then use that variable in here instead. Or you could directly reference that query list action and get the, refer to that field that you want to pull in. Either way is fine. Either way is valid. It just depends on how you want to design it, and maybe there might be some situations where it might make sense to do one or the other. But ultimately, it kind of comes out to being one and the same as far as the actual results here, right? So if we query some other list and we're getting the assignee field from some other list, we're going to put that value here. We could just as easily put that into a variable and use this syntax instead. So that's different options for the percent signs and different options for the mail template. And the other area you can use those percent signs is over here in our line HTML control in NITRO Forms. So we're in NITRO Forms now. We're going to bring this line HTML control into our form, and we can use our dynamic placeholder in here. So if you wanted to use, let's see, category, we could put in category. You can use just the internal name, that's fine, and like that. Now, the reason you want to do that is if you want to use a dynamic placeholder evaluation. So what this will do is, instead of, without the percents, it would just be, whatever the value is of category would appear in the line HTML control here at the top. So hit apply. So you see the difference. There's the dynamic capability, so it can make it dynamic. So if category changes, that field will change in the form. So that it'll actually update that form control and show whatever the updated value is before the item is saved. Otherwise, if you have just the category up there, it'll be whatever the category was when the item was opened. Even if it was opened in edit mode and you then subsequently change it, it's still going to show you whatever that original category name was until you reopen the form. So this is, static. It'll obviously change if you change it, but this will change on the fly in the UI of having the form open. You'll be able to have that dynamic evaluation and change the value in that line HTML control. That could be useful in certain scenarios where you want to make sure the user knows which context they're in the form. And then, if they change the type of form or change the status, that information can be presented right at the top of the form before they even hit save. They'll see that that status is not the one it was originally. So another useful case for that. But those would be the three main areas that we're using that percent sign. Again, like I said, that's one that comes up pretty frequently as not really being something that people know when to use it or when not to use it. But that hopefully will help clarify things as far as when it can be used, when it should be used or thought or considered, versus when you don't need to worry about it. The other, excuse me, sorry. The other ones I have on here are kind of more, there's a little less confusion, but there can be some confusion around it. And one of the confusing things, I'm just going to move over to the right table here for the curly brackets versus the square brackets. And one of the confusions here can be that SharePoint in a lot of places, like in list views and some other areas, will use square brackets for contextual placeholders like me or today. Or now, I think they really only use me and today in the list view filters, and that's those square brackets. But we use it in our code for Nitro. We have to use the curly bracket instead. And you can see here I've outlined the fields that are available, the actual contextual values that are available for these different things. So if you wanted to refer to now or me in the condition builder, you got the brackets around it. Workflows are run outside the context of the user, so they don't have the me function, and the form and actions are run by a person who's logged in, so the me function is there as well. And you kind of see that throughout. I mean, some of the column mappings we don't have the me, but today and now are possible. But they all use that curly bracket around it. The other, and that's mostly used for those contextual values. You don't really see it around other things other than if you look down here for the query list action, it does use the curly brackets around the current action and then whatever field you want to put in there. So if you're updating a variable in your custom action or in your Nitro workflow, you can refer to the current action and do a hash and the field that you want to pull into it. Right, so let's come back over here to custom actions. Let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to create a variable var1. I'm just going to call var1 be consistent. I'm not going to put anything in it. And then my query list action over here, I'm going to go get some information from my, let's say, change request list. And I'm going to build a query. So show me everything where category equals, let's see, where is it? Change request list, the owner equals, let's say, the requester. So this is where you use those brackets. Do requester, like that. So we're getting our query together and we're going to map something into our variable. So we're going to map something to our var1 variable, and we can go ahead and use the current action syntax. Action and hash, and we want to get their department, let's say. Requester department. So something like that. So now so you can see that uses the current action. It's saying we're going to take this current action where we're getting this information from change request and populate that requester department into the variable. So another way to get that information. But that's another area you're going to see those curly brackets being used, probably not used that often. I mean, there's other ways to do the same thing, but I just want to point it out that there is a possibility of using those curly brackets in this context here. So just for completeness sake, I want to make sure you know all the areas you could potentially see it. But for the most part, you can see across the board, it's going to be a lot of times around those contextual placeholders. Another one that I want to put on here just because I see it used, and until I built this table, it didn't really click with me, like why are we using this collection value? How does it know what we're using? This really comes into play if we're using a variable that has multiple values in it. And that could be a situation where you have an assigned, let's say in a tickets list, you have an assigned staff field. That assigned staff field could have multiple users in it. Now you want to take those multiple users and create tasks for them. And what you can do there is use this collection variable or collection value where you're going to put your assigned staff members into a variable in the custom action. I can show you what that looks like here. Do variables and we'll do assigned staff, assigned staff. All right, so that's going to take that assigned staff field and put it in here. Now that could have as many people as needed in there. That could have 3 people, it could have 1 person, it could have 20 people. But for each one of those people, you want to now go and create a task. So what you can do is, let me get rid of some of these unnecessary things. Hang on a second, delete that. So I'll leave that. I'll leave the query list for now. But essentially what you can do is you want to create a list item, and we're going to run this for a variable. And this is variable 1. So this is the scenario where we're going to use that at collection value. So we're going to run it, and we're going to populate a list called let's see, associated tasks. And we can map a whole bunch of stuff, but the main thing we want to look at is mapping the assigned to field. And we're going to use that, make sure I get it right, at collection value. All right, there we go. At collection value. So now that will allow that assigned to field, it'll iterate through and create a task for each one of those people in that assigned staff field. So you can use that same concept across for reiterating tasks across multiple groups of users or across groups of users in the same way. So make sure I have that syntax right. Yeah, okay, it's got to have the curly brackets around it. I apologize. So yeah, another area you're going to see curly brackets. Let me just make sure it's exactly right so we can. This is up on video. People will know what it's supposed to be. All right, there we go. That's the correct syntax right there. So that, hopefully you find that useful as far as getting the why you'd use a variable with multiple. You could use a variable with multiple users in it, and then why you'd use this is because now it'll go and create a task for each one of those users. So it's kind of a nice way to sort of like build in an inherent loop without building out a whole looping workflow scenario, which of course we have the ability to loop through tasks, et cetera, et cetera. You can do that, but this is another way to kind of handle the same sort of situation where you have multiple values and you want to parse out those values across multiple items when you create them. All right, so that's that collection value. And then the square brackets are kind of the last one down here that we're going to talk about today. And those are the ones I think you're going to use the most. And I think this is the one where people probably have the least, least confusion around it. And or if you do, and that's I've laid it out here. But this is the one that's used most frequently. It's pretty much any column placeholder is going to have the brackets around it. That they might be encapsulated into a percentage field with those 2%, but it's still going to be the brackets around the actual column information, whether it's the display name, internal name, or both. And I know I've mentioned this before, but it's important to note since we're talking about syntax, on your mail templates, the internal and display name are reversed, in that the internal name is first, display name is second. Pretty much everywhere else, it could either just use internal name or display and internal for your column placeholders. Some of that's for backward compatibility purposes. You can use internal versus display and internal. Really, the internal name is the main one. And if you don't know what the internal name is in SharePoint, every field in SharePoint has an internal name and a display name, and they can be different. They can be very different, or they can be exactly the same. It could be a situation where they're exactly the same. And this is best shown in forms. And one feature I think I mentioned in one of my forms workshops at some point in time, but probably good to reiterate here, since we're talking about syntax and the column and display name and internal name. You'll see right here on any of our NITRO forms, we've taken the step of showing you the display name at the top, which is what's shown on the form typically, unless you override it. But then you also have the internal name right here. So you can always get that right from the context of the NITRO form without having to go and dig around for it, which you can do in the settings. There's ways to do it. And if you're versed in the SharePoint, you should be able, you probably know that already. But for those who aren't maybe not aware or don't want to dig around for it, I find it really easy, in my use of NITRO, just to go right here to NITRO forms and get the internal name and display name right here. Now, whether I just use internal or display, it depends on what the context is. And you can see here, there's different scenarios for different situations. But for the most part, if you need that information, you can go right to your NITRO form for that list and get it right from there, and you're good to go. And that's really important too, because sometimes these can be, I don't think we have any in our out of the box tool like this, where if you add a space, you'll see a lot of times the internal name has no space. But if you add a space, it creates this like almost ASCII character of underscore 0020x or whatever it is. It looks kind of ugly. So we try to avoid it by not creating columns with spaces. But if you do, it's not a big deal. Just you can come here and just copy paste directly, so you don't even have to remember about it. So there's that. And the other thing I want to kind of highlight that we've it's kind of help with all this and helping on understanding syntax, and especially when it comes to functions, which you didn't really talk about today, is that in our column mappings, a lot of times in our column mappings, it's going to be easier for you to use our expression builder, which is basically builds the whole expression for you. So you don't even have to think about all the syntax stuff. I think it's good to know in case you can't use it. I know we don't have expression builder for our query builder. We don't have it for the condition builder. There's certain other areas where we don't have it. So it is important to know some of that syntax until we build in ways that can be automated for you. But especially with the column mappings like we have here, you have ways to build in that that syntax without having to worry too much about it. Like see contextual, so we do have some other contextual options. Do contextual me, it's automatically going to put that in there for you, right? So you don't have to think about, is it curly, is it square? It doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to think about it. Just change it to any of them. You can see it does that right automatically. And you can even build this out to be more robust as far as even nesting functions, right? So we have all our functions here, and let's say you want to do a string concatenation function, but embedded in that, you want to get your, some information from a query list. So we could do our query list. We don't have a query list action here, but we could get information from that and then concatenate it with some other stuff, and then even take a variable and put that in there as well. And then we can even nest functions. So if we wanted to add another thing here and add date time or get a date time or something like that, and we could do that, nest that function within that string concatenation function. And once it's all said and done, it'll just go ahead and pop that into here, and you don't even have to worry about the syntax. It's all done for you. So yeah, so that's about all I had. I wanted to highlight that expression builder, highlight the handout that I have with the different syntax options. Again, like I said, if there's anything you're not seeing or something that's still a little confusing, let me know. You can pop it into the questions box or send me an email afterwards. And hopefully you found this helpful today. So I appreciate everyone coming to the session today. Like Chris has said, this will be up on YouTube, and you'll be able to reference it down the line. But yeah, Chris, anything else you want to chime in with?
I appreciate you walking us all through all those details today. I know it really helped me, and I hope it helped everyone else as well. And I appreciate everyone for joining us. And if you do have any questions or requests for future workshops. We would love to hear from you. That's one of the big things that we put on the workshops to try to support you and help you get as much as you possibly can out of NITRO. So if you have anything that crosses your mind that you would love to see James cover in the future, if you'd like to see us go into, a little bit further detail with it, give us a shout. Let us know. We want to hear from you. And we just may cover it next. You never know.
That's absolutely right. Always looking for good topics. I hate to retread, but sometimes it's good to retread topics too, because they can get, deep dive in Nitro Forms. The last one I did might have been 2 years ago, so I might want to do that one again. But
Oh yeah, there's probably some changes since then.
Right. But yeah, like Chris has said, if you have any suggestions, there will be a survey that goes out after we close the session, and just feel free to fill that out, put your notes in there, or just let me know what you think would be helpful. So appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, James.
All right, take care. Bye.